Hi everybody! In this video I'll be restoring the wooden steering wheel for my Alfa Romeo Spider. Now, not all the wooden steering wheels are built the same way, but what you'll see here you'll be able to apply to most of them. I'll be doing this for the very first time actually. I haven't done the steering wheel restoration before, but I did spend a year working as a carpenter, doing custom woodworking, so I have a pretty good idea what to do with it. Now, I've seen some videos out there during the restorations, but most of them is just putting a new finish on it. And there are still a lot of good tips out there, but I haven't seen one in really bad condition, just like this one is. So, with that being said, let me show you what I got. Okay. The whole thing looks like it's been spray painted at some point. Yeah, definitely with some silver spray paint. Most of the finish is missing. There's only a little bit left right here. There's delamination and some cracks all over it. There's some little pieces missing like here. And over here we have a whole strip missing. It was delaminated and fell off, broke off at some point. We have more tiny cracks. I hope you can see them on camera. And I have another piece, another strip missing here. And this one as well, pretty deep, goes all the way to the metal. You can probably see the metal right there. Alright, let's get to it. I started with removing whatever's left of the original finish, and then I took 80 grit sandpaper and started sanding it down. You need to sand it down until all the rotten wood is gone, until you're left with nothing but a nice healthy surface where we can start our restoration from. First thing I'm going to address is this deep crack that goes all the way down to the metal. I'm using Tide Bond 3 and a razor knife, trying to push the glue all the way down to the bottom of the crack. I decided to put this part in a vise because it's a pretty big area, but I had to be careful not to put too much pressure on it so that I don't crack something else. With the bottom of the steering wheel in a vise, I decided to fix this tiny fragile piece before it gets broken by accident. And this is what we got after day one. There's nothing else I can do to it right now other than give the glue some time to dry, so let's skip to tomorrow. And it turned out pretty good. Now, next thing to do is get that area ready to add the missing piece. Now, I started leveling this area using the chisel. Now, if you use the chisel, just take it really easy and keep in mind the direction of the grain. If you're going up or down the grain, it will produce different results. Then I used some sandpaper on a block of wood, trying to get this surface as smooth and as level as possible to get it ready for the new strip of wood. Let me show you what I mean. Here, I'll try to give you a roller coaster view of it. And make sure the flat spot gradually disappears into the circle, just like that. For this part, I cut a strip of mahogany, roughly 1/8 of an inch thick, and started gluing it down. Once I had it in place, I started applying pressure from the center outwards. Same thing, you need to apply pressure, but don't put too much so you don't crack something else in the process. And for anything like this, you can definitely never have too many clamps. Next, I need to recreate the piece that's missing behind the spoke right there. Luckily the other two are intact, so it gives me a good reference on what I need to do. Again, I used a piece of mahogany, and it took me roughly an hour and a lot of test fitting to recreate this piece, and it just fits perfectly. Just like that. Beautiful. Now let's go ahead and glue it down, clamp it down, and this is what we got after day 2. So let's skip ahead to day 3. Everything looks good. The strip is on there pretty tight. Same with a little piece behind the spoke. So let's go ahead and shape it. Take all the extra wood off. Now for this part, I'm using the orbital sander because there is a lot of wood in the way you need to get rid of. Of course, you want to be careful with it, not to hit the areas you don't want to hit. But at this point, it's okay. I started with 120 grit, and once I got close to the shape I wanted, I switched to 220. That way, even if you hit something you don't want to hit, it's not gonna do a lot of scratches like 120 would. But eventually, of course, you need to switch to hand sanding, and that always gives the best results. As always, remember to wear a mask, especially when you come to higher grits, because you'll create a lot of fine dust that'll stay up in the air for quite some time. Here there's a long but very thin piece of wood missing, so I'm gonna go and clean it up, make it all flat and smooth, kind of like with a big piece. Now, because this piece of wood that I'm adding here is so thin, it won't hold a lot of tension once it's bent into the shape of the wheel, and for that reason I'm just gonna use some clear super glue for this. But you only have seconds to put it in place, so this is the part where you can definitely use extra pair of hands. And 10 minutes later, it's ready to be sanded down, shaped, and here it is, good as new. Next, I'm gonna go ahead and fix all the delaminated areas in the outer edge of the steering wheel. In other words, all these areas where I can still squeeze together, especially pull them together with clamps. Like this one here, this one here. They're all pretty tiny, but they need to be addressed. For that, I'm using a medical syringe and watered down wood glue in order to get the glue down all those tiny little cracks. And I'm putting C-clamps on it as I go. That concludes the day 3. Let's skip to day 4. Here I'm sanding down the whole steering wheel with 320 grit sandpaper, and notice I'm wearing a glove on my left hand simply to prevent sweat or any grease from my hands getting into the steering wheel as I'm getting close to putting stain on it. Now I'm using some rock hard epoxy putty and some mahogany wood filler to fill the tiniest imperfections in the wood before staining. Finally, onto the most satisfying part of the whole process, putting some stain on it. I decided to go with orange wood stain, and it's beautiful to see this piece coming back to life right in front of your eyes, back to its former glory. This concludes day 4 of the restoration, and a big shout out to my friend Robert for letting me use his shop for this part of the process. Day 5. For finish, I decided to use a marine grade varnish because it's UV resistant, mold resistant, crack resistant, all that good stuff that makes sense to use on a steering wheel, something that'll often be inside, outside, out in the sun, all that stuff. The product recommends at least 3 coats with 8 hours of drying time in between the coats and some light sanding as well. But I'm probably gonna go with at least 5 or 6 coats because this is a steering wheel after all. It's gonna get a lot of use, so I better do this part right. And this is how it looks like after the first coat of varnish. Not bad. Next day, I'm giving it a light sand with a sanding pad, but you can also use some steel wool or 400 and above grit sandpaper. Anything like that will work. And putting another coat of finish. Now go ahead and do that again, and again, and again, and you get the idea. For the last couple of coats, I decided to use the foam brush instead of bristle brush because it leaves a lot less streaks. With wood part being complete, time to disassemble the steering wheel and restore all the metal parts. First I'm gonna go ahead and polish the horn buttons. Now this piece, just like the rest of the steering wheel, has been spray painted, so I'm taking it really easy because it's aluminum, and I'm using the Dremel. I'm trying out different bits, and I'm using a very light pressure, as light as I can get away with. You can always step it up a notch. Then, as always, switching to hand sanding and polishing off with a mother's aluminum polish. The steering wheel itself is made out of steel, so I'm using a 400 grit sandpaper on it, and I'm trying to do all my sanding, all my moves in one direction to give it a nice clean finished look. I'm also using the sanding pads in some of the hard to reach areas. I'm really starting to like using those, and I also applied some mother's aluminum polish to the steering wheel itself. And without further ado, after 2 weeks of work, this is the finished product. It exceeded my expectations. It was totally worth it. Beautiful glossy finish. The Alfa Romeo logo is visible again. All the metal just looks amazing. It looks brand new. I couldn't be happier with how it turned out. We went from this to this, and from this to this. I hope you guys enjoyed the process as much as I did. Thank you for watching, and until next time, sloppy out.